a special trip out here for us and had to be up early at the airport and all that good stuff. So really appreciate your taking the time to spend a few minutes with us here tonight and talk a little bit about one of your favorite subjects, golf. Maybe what I'll do is I'll just walk through a little bit of the objective for the evening, what we were expecting to get out of this, what the format is, and then we'll move on with things with Jeff here. So as you can see, the format for the evening is meant to be informal. In fact, when I talked to Jeff on the phone, he said, well, should I put my tie on? I said, no, don't do that. We'll wear a jacket, but no ties. And we're just going to go through, I got a few questions here that I'd like to go through with Jeff that he and I have talked a little bit about. A couple that I might surprise him with, but nothing that he won't know the answer to. And then that should probably take, I don't know, 45, 50 minutes. And then we'll open it up to the floor to ask questions as you wish of Jeff and learn things. As we go, I've got my two specialists in the back of the room trying to tape what we're doing.
No guarantees.
No guarantees. Okay. So thanks, guys, for helping us. You know, we have a great golf club here. We have 535 members and shareholders. We've got some 200 spouses that play golf here at the course, and about 200 juniors. So, just a great golf course. And a course where we wind up playing 35,000 rounds a year, which is well over the average across the country. We're also currently facing, one of the oil industry's biggest downturns. I know I worked there for a long time, as many of you did, and although we've all been through the ups and downs, this is one of the harder ones. And so Calgary's facing a little tough times in the oil patch. At the same time, we've got a very competitive golf club market, both private, public, and kind of mass merchant. So there's lots going on out there competing for the golfer in today's world. And what we really want out of tonight is to better understand what's happening with golf across North America, scope back to Canada, back to Alberta a little bit, maybe even down to Calgary. And Jeff here as CEO of the National Golf Course Owners Association has exposure to golf across North America and in fact around the world, Europe as well, and meets all kinds of different people in the industry and I know has gleaned a lot from them. So this evening we'd like to kind of hear his perspective to help us think about how we manage going forward over the next few years and kind of what's the world look like going down there. So I hope that fits with your expectations, Jeff.
Sounds good.
And with everybody here's expectations. So again, we'll make sure we leave time for questions from the floor later on in the evening. But for now, we'll get started with a couple of questions to kind of get going. Is that all right?
Fair enough.
Is your mic working okay?
Are we hearing me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So Jeff, I just mentioned that you travel all over the place. You meet all kinds of different people in the industry and so forth. What can you tell us about the general state of the golf club industry in North America and Canada? Are we, we're losing golf courses and golfers? Media stories we read are, tend to be a little negative.
Well, it's a great place to start this kind of a conversation, I think. That's really two questions, I guess, sort of the state of the industry and then the media, because I got a bit of a pet peeve with the media being too negative about it, which doesn't help us, so maybe we'll come back to that in a second. But on the first part of it, golf's going through a bit of a correction, maybe, sort of in economic terms, after decades, like 4 or 5 decades of continuous growth. And to varying degrees across the markets that you talk about, United States, Canada, Europe in particular, it's the same issue, and I think boiled down to its real fundamental, it's just the supply and demand equation. We had those decades of growth in demand, and it was accompanied by decades of more golf courses being built to create the supply of product for the golfers to play at. that couldn't necessarily go on forever and eventually caught up to itself. Again, we're fortunate, there's a few other industries you could point to, oil industry included, that could say we went 40 or 50 years of this continuous growth. However, we did hit that point, and in the United States, it's generally agreed that 2000 or 2001 is when they peaked, and since that time, this correction has been occurring where golf courses themselves have had to either cut back or the number of courses had to be reduced because the demand was no longer going to continue on the path it had been on. In Canada, that story was more of a 2007. That's a bit of a generalization across the country, but 2007 we peaked here, 2000, 2001 they peaked in the States. Their correction has been more severe as well as earlier, significant declines in rounds played, number of golfers, and therefore more challenging market for the golf course industry. In Canada, it's been more of a flat status quo, like an end to the growth, flat or slight contraction in most of the country. So it's good to be Canadian in terms of that. I think you could draw some parallels to the relative economies, certainly from the 2008 till now period where the Canadian economy has outperformed the American economy. Well, that does trickle through to the golf industry and the amount of money that customers have to spend, membership clubs as well as public play, and similarly in Europe where they got hit much harder. So all in all, Canada's in a pretty good spot when you compare it to the world. And we actually are, our participation rate, the percentage of people who play golf in Canada is #1 of all countries in the world. People are surprised to hear that. It's almost double the United States. It's way ahead of most countries in Europe, where we'll be hovering around 20% of our population plays at least some golf, and that's how it's measured in all these countries. And you take like Germany, it's 0.5%, so like we're 40 times the play rate that they have over there. And a lot of the European countries are in that range. Sweden and the UK get up to the top of the European numbers, and they're still nowhere near our numbers.
But we're double the U.S.?
Almost double the U.S. I think we're fortunate to have, the question why, right? There's no sort of proven answer to that question, but we're fortunate to have relatively good accessibility to land to build the courses on. Right? We have a relatively strong middle class to feed a sport or an industry like golf. Compared to the United States, which is much more sort of class structure. There's a whole lot of people,
right.
A bigger proportion of them who can't afford the game, and then there's just the different mix of multiculturalism that fits well in Canada. And I think we're very outdoorsy, athletic, kind of sort of the baby boomer crowd has got that lifestyle to us here in Canada. We like to be outdoors. And I also think there's a hockey influence that nobody's really proven, but the fact that we have more left-handed golfers than any country in the world here. And of course, a right-handed person typically grips a hockey stick left hand low, and quite often, hockey being what it is in Canada, you pick up a hockey stick before a golf club, well, then you pick up a golf club left hand low.
I think it was Adam Sandler that did it.
Or it could be Adam Sandler. So it's kind of mixed messages on where our industry is. I think we're going to be careful that we look at it optimistically, but those peak years for now are behind us. The other half of it, you want the media, if you come back to it later or now, I wouldn't mind chipping in on that one.
Just one second, I just want to go back on one thing you just said. So the U.S. peaked in 2001, Canada peaked 2007. Is there any kind of correlation about the fall off then in those intervening years?
Well, our fall off was much, much less than theirs.
Yeah.
Would be the most important statement to me. Sometimes I think looking at the United States is like looking into the future, and a lot of things to do with business trends that then come here. So that may be part of the lag, if that's what you're implying, the sort of 6-year lag.
Right.
It may be partly that. I think it's more so that we just have had a stronger golf industry. We're fortunate for that in Canada. it's been a little more sustainable than what they've had in the States. And the other part of it in the States is they went absolutely crazy on real estate developed golf, which is also a concern here in Canada, but a matter of degree, and it has a lot to do with weather.
Sure.
The further south you go, the more sensible it is to have real estate on a golf course. Here, it's real estate on a snow-covered field for half the year, so the demand isn't quite as high.
Yeah.
And they got ahead of themselves a little bit by building. This is on the supply side of that demand and supply equation. They overbuilt to a greater extent than we did, largely driven by real estate rather than actually feasibility of do we need a golf course like that in this location at this time at that price point.
Right. So, yeah.
Again, better be in Canada.
Yeah, driven by developers rather than developers. So let's go on to the media piece. I know it's on your mind, so.
Yeah, it's a good talking point. You've probably noticed in the last year for sure, just a propensity for negative headlines about the golf industry, and it gets overdone. I think one of my points for takeaway today is just to be careful that doesn't overwhelm us, and actually I think we need to do a better job as a whole industry and individuals, I think, at this club, part of it, to just tell our story. We got a great story, but we were maybe guilty of not telling it to the media, and the absence of that, they gravitate to those negative headlines because it's an easier story for them to write. They're supposed to attract eyeballs, and negative stories are easier to attract sensationalism than positive stories. A lot of that started with one article, because the media is fairly incestuous. When one of them does something, they all jump on and run with it for as much as they can get out of that particular theme. One article about Dick's Sporting Goods last spring in the States that basically said their golf retail sales were down about 10%. And they laid off some golf pros as a result of that. And from there were literally hundreds of these articles, and they would have headlines like golf is dying, or why is golf dying, and the decline of golf and the end of golf. And it's really not true, although I made those statements that we're going through this bit of a correction. That's to a certain extent a large part of a normal business cycle in an industry. You can't forever and ever go this way, and it's not nearly as doom and gloom as the way they write the stories. Here in Canada, I mean, a much better story to tell that reporter who calls this club to say, I want some quotes on what's wrong with golf, is to point out to them, although we've had a slight reduction, we're still, here in Canada, the #1 participation sport. More people play golf than any other sport in this country. People say, oh, it must be hockey. Well, no, it's not. It's golf.
Yeah, I was amazed when I read that.
Yeah, and in terms of economics, and we could go into this in more detail later, but economic impact studies show that the Canadian golf industry, just taking that for the moment, generates more economic impact in Canada than all other participation sports combined. And so these are huge, like #1 most charitable fundraising done in golf of any sport in the country. #1 employment, all these things. Positive stories that you can tell, and you can go on with the healthy recreation, the environmental. There's a lot of stories that you can feed into that are positive stories as opposed to those negative.
Oh, absolutely. I think Phil can even talk about his Fitbit and what it does for him on the golf course.
And the reason I think that's important, when we relate it back to, the supply and the demand of golf, what do golfers or people who don't play golf that are considering golf, what do they think of our sport?
Yeah.
Well, if you read all that negative publicity, if we were telling them it's not fun, and these are kind of lines they use, it's perceived to be not fun, it takes too long, it costs too much. If we're allowing those stories to be out there, it reduces the number of people that are interested in playing golf or joining this club, or the amount of times they play, and any of those things. I think managing the media is something that we should all pay a little bit of attention to and bear in mind. The glass is actually half full, not half empty.
Good. I like your optimism. I like that. The other thing that I did when I was preparing for this was I was led to a couple of studies that NAGA has done. NAGA is
National Allied Golf Association, so that's group that John was referring to, all the leading national associations.
So they've done a lot of research on golf, and interesting reading for me with a lot of different statistics and so on. And says as you intimated here, that the growth of golf in Canada is flat. That is, there's as many people joining or taking up golf as there are leaving at the moment, right? But it's steady. Can you tell us if there's any difference among the provinces, and kind of does Alberta stand out at all in that?
Yeah, I think within Canada, the general statement is Western Canada in the last 5-6 years has outperformed Eastern Canada. And then inside of that,
In hockey,
Alberta, in hockey too, yeah. Oh geez, you win one series. It's not my fault Toronto's in Eastern Canada. I'm an Ottawa Senators season ticket holder. So that's a general statement, and I think inside of that, Alberta and Saskatchewan have been surprisingly strong. Saskatchewan actually has the highest percentage, like a per capita measurement of the population that plays golf, followed closely by Alberta. So I think the golf course industry here in Alberta, and certainly in Calgary, is, I would call Calgary the strongest over recent years golf market for golf club operations in North America. So I mean, I think you should be feeling good about the market you're in. Tougher than it used to be, because there's it's a matter of degree, right? And I guess you're going to get a bit of a test now that the oil situation is going through what it is, and how will that trickle through to golf. But it has been supported nicely by fairly strong economic fundamentals, a lot of migration into a city like Calgary. I mean, you would know the statistics more than I, but it's a fast growing city, and the demographics of the people who are moving in fit the profile of people who play golf, but as well as any city in the country too.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a good market for golf here.
Yeah, and that's what the stats in that study would prove out for sure. So you touched on this a couple months ago when we were talking about how golf impacts the countryside. Can you expand a little bit on what the impact of golf on the Canadian economy is, and what are you doing with the government to promote that? Because you're in Ottawa, you do some lobbying there, I'm assuming.
Yeah, we do. I think just by way of quick summary of the National Golf Course Owners Association, government advocacy is one of the key things we do. Our focus is like through the business lens. We lead the business side of golf, and advocacy. We do a lot of purchasing to help with the expense side for golf courses, a lot of marketing to help drive, the revenue side for golf courses, a lot of professional development or knowledge or information for golf course operators, a lot of market research, things of that nature. So that's what we do. So then on advocacy, that being one of those things on that list, government has not understood our sport very well in the past, and I would say shame on us. We didn't tell our story. It's kind of like the media thing. In the absence of telling your story, people backfill in whatever they want. Government has perceived golf to be nothing but elitist, high-end, which is where it came from. And there's still beautiful clubs like this that cater to the above average disposable income, and that's great. But the vast majority of golf is actually much more diverse than that. And we have to get that message through to government. So number one, it's not a predominantly elitist sport. It is an every person sport. That's a message we push at them so that they'll take us seriously. The average green fee in Canada, just as a reference point on that point there, different studies, ranges from $37 to $42, which is not an elitist activity. And what are those Calgary Flames tickets? I mean, it's $42 isn't unreasonable. So part of it's the elitism that we have to shake that off and let them realize how diverse our sport really is. And part of it is to treat it like an industry. So that comes back to those economic impact numbers. Right. Because in the absence of us informing them, they see golf as a great game. And they don't take it seriously if you're then, lobbying, so to speak, as part of your advocacy strategy, until such time as you can demonstrate that it's a vital industry. And that's where we start pointing out, 126,000 people are employed in the Canadian golf industry. And some of those other numbers that I quoted earlier, the top line number in the economic impact study is $14.3 billion of direct gross domestic product. which is approaching 1% of Canada's economy. It's a much bigger and more critical industry, as well as a great game than government realizes. And then when we want to go talk to them about protecting our industry, we have a chance once they start treating us like the forestry industry, the oil industry, the mining industry, any other industries that you want to name. And then that matters when they're talking about environmental issues like how are pesticides used on a golf course.
Sure.
That matters when they're putting up the property taxes of golf courses because they previously thought that's an easy target. That matters when we go in and my current pet peeve is that golf in the Income Tax Act, federally now speaking, you're not permitted to take your client to the golf course and have the appropriate 50% deduction for building business on a golf course that you are permitted to at that damn Flames game again. But the Flames, any concert tickets, your restaurants, your skiing, your tennis, anything you can name that we compete with as an industry for corporate business, client entertainment, the Income Tax Act says don't take them there. So it's hurting our golf industry because of that. So that's an example of us going in that case, Parliament Hill in Ottawa, many times to meet with many members of Parliament to persuade them that they have to change that in the Income Tax Act because it's unfairly hurting our golf industry. We can only do that by presenting those economic impact study numbers and positioning it as an industry as well as a great game.
Over $14 billion.
It's more than you think. And at the same time, when we go in there and we make that sound big, that accomplishes one goal. At the same time, we have to back it up with it's just a collection of a whole lot of small businesses.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to get put in the same box as corporate Canada because they're not as friendly unless you got a whole lot of power, which sometimes corporate Canada can pull off, but we wouldn't be able to. So we're very quick to point out that every golf course and pretty much all the suppliers, every element of our industry are small businesses. And if you position it as a big collection of small businesses, then you got both points working for you. We're big enough to be taken as a serious industry, but we're a bunch of small business operators. The average golf course, this one would be doing more, but the average golf course is a little under $1.5 million in annual gross revenues.
Right.
That's taking all the courses in the country and blending them all together. There's a few at 10 million, but most of them are, 1 to 1.5 million small businesses.
And did I read there's 2,300 golf courses and driving ranges?
Yeah, a little over that, almost 2,400.
In Canada?
In Canada, which is again, on a per capita basis, that's a lot of golf courses for the size of their population.
Yeah.
And it's justified by those previous statements we made about golf is the #1 participation sport in our country. They go hand in hand, the number of courses you have and the number of players you have. It's great for the golfers because with that many courses in every market in the country, you've got such a wide selection of type of course you want to play for the golfing experience and the price point, anything from $1 a hole to $250 or I guess Cabot Links and so on. Cabot Cliffs out there talking about pushing $300. They're going to be close to that. So golfers benefit from the fact we have so many courses of all different types, and they're pretty much everywhere in the whole country. It's such a diverse sport.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's great. I wonder if Cabot Cliffs is even open yet.
Yeah, it's just about to open. I think it's July 1.
Well, I wanted to know about I was thinking about the East Coast and whether they
We're talking about the weather pattern.
whether there's snow yet in order to play golf out there.
You guys here had you're like a month early on your golf season, all things considered. That's another east-west thing this year because the further east you go, they had all that snow. If you get all the way out there, it's unbelievable.
Well, you're telling me they're still not playing golf in Ottawa, or just barely?
Just opening this week. We're a few weeks behind. We had the coldest February on record. Thank God for global warming. Imagine how cold it would have been if it wasn't global warming. But that led to a slow start to the golf season across Ontario, Quebec, and Atlantic Canada. So we are a hostage to the weather in this industry, and there's only so much you can do about that.
I just got to make sure we get that pipeline over there so you can get more.
That'll keep us up.
Okay, that's great. Thanks very much for that. I want to talk a little bit about demographics of golf. And I know from all the people you talk to in the studies through NAGA here, What can you tell us about kind of the general demographics, you know, as the baby boomers who've been the slug in the pig in the python, as they call it, has moved along? What's the potential impact of that on golf?
Well, I guess starting with the baby boomers, it's been a huge part of driving our golf industry to date.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the good and the bad news of it going forward is the majority of the baby boomers haven't retired yet. And they are, in theory, going to have substantial amounts of disposable income, and they are going to have time on their hands, and they do have a lifestyle, they have had a lifestyle, and expecting to continue having a lifestyle that matches up pretty well for an outdoor active sport like golf. So for the foreseeable future, we should be able to see some upside as they retire. I think the downside to it is as they work their way through, and the older end of the baby boomers, you know, it's not all that many years before they start playing less golf, and then as the whole group, there's 20 years worth of them, so you know, you got the early and the tail end of it, but as the whole group works through, that's going to take a significant chunk of our golfing population out of play or reduced play as they age, which I think leads you to the rest of the demographic discussion about, you know, how do you replace it, and that's a tricky question, and I think we all have to put on our marketing hats and maybe a little bit of innovation to figure out how we cater somewhat better to younger demographic groups and some of the wider, you know, the multiculturalism as immigration is going to start to come into play as we have to replace our population. And certainly the weakness at the moment, looking forward, would be the junior demographic. That same consumer behavior study that you referenced earlier, that's where it shows the biggest weakness is we just aren't resonating with the juniors the way we used to in the game of golf. And if you're going to replace that baby boomer void, once we eventually get past the point where it's really driving it, you're going to need solutions on the junior end.
Yeah, and as I read that study, I struggled a little bit to understand how they are representing that, but if I get it right, they're saying that there was a certain percentage of people who learned how to play golf between the ages of, say, 6 and 15. And when they compare that today to the percentage of the youth 6 to 15, the group today is significantly smaller. Is that right?
Yeah, they were trying to make it a generation-to-generation comparison to explain the point, and pretty much what you said is the truth of it, and it works out to somewhere around half, and it's all proportional, so regardless of how many people were in either generation, just proportionally, about half the rate that the previous generation played golf when they were juniors. Right. So it's a bit of a dangerous trend, and it's a good discussion point to try to figure out what to do about that. I don't know that anybody claims to have the silver bullet answer to that, but I think what I'm putting on the table is we got to get ahead of the curve and figure that out. You even just look at the demographics of your membership at this club, and you probably and contemplate some of the things that I'm saying about you got a somewhat, call it an over 50 tendency, and they're going to be a year older, not a year younger every year, and as that moves forward, what you need to do to fill in behind that. It's not all about juniors, but that's one of the big ones because we're seeing in those studies to show that we're not resonating with them well enough. What do we need to do about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of the glass being half full, we had the junior open house yesterday. No, Sunday. Yesterday, right? It was great. There were a lot of juniors here, and it was great to see. It was a really good event. Great to see our numbers come along.
It's almost like it's one of those situations where when you get them involved, they love it. Yeah. Right. So that's the great that you're talking about. You're looking at, there they are, and it's great. It's how do you attract them to get in and get involved? Just that trick in the marketing mix. When they're distracted by a lot of other things in life, they're married to a little technology thing in their pocket, and they have a hard time getting away from that. They're looking for shorter experiences than typically your golf experiences. That's a tendency. It doesn't mean that's all they will do, but they have those tendencies that we have to somehow cut through and make sure we're making it a fun and a little more active experience. And it gets you into conversations about tradition versus progress.
Right.
And our industry has relied so heavily and has done very well based on the strong traditions of the game. And the higher up the scale of golf courses you go to, high-end private club like this, you would have a deeper preference for the traditions of the game. Yet those traditions don't resonate as well with the people we're talking about that we got to get in there, that younger demographic, and you get into dress code issues, and you get into cell phones and smartphones on the course, and you get into music on the course.
You just segued right into my next question, which is great.
Good.
Because we talked earlier over dinner and so on about what's changing in the game out there, right? We all read about shorter courses, fewer holes, larger cup sizes, frisbee golf, foot golf, all that stuff. Can you tell us what are any of those things are kind of taking root, or what's coming?
Yeah, it's another one of those yes and no. Innovation in business is a good thing, and I think happens faster today than ever before. So it's fair play, I think, for golf courses to test the boundaries of progress versus tradition and to look at some of these innovative ideas. I think that's fair, and more so in a public facility than at this one, but I think for everybody to look in the mirror and think that way. As you go down that path, though, I think some are falling into the path of saying, hey, is golf broken? We need to reinvent it with radical change. And I believe that that's not the case, that golf is, I come back to, hey, it's the #1 participation sport in the country. How broken can it be? Why is it #1? People like it the way it is, and we don't want to damage that. Some of those innovations you're talking about, I think, start to get in the way of the traditional game of golf. So I don't see them as big solutions going forward. Comment on a couple of them that you just mentioned. For example, foot golf. I don't know if you've been hearing about it, but it's come on fairly strong in the last couple of years. Intended originally to be part of the solution for demand for real golf, having hit a ceiling. And what do we do to attract more people? Well, we could get soccer players to come out and experience the golf course as they kick a soccer ball into a 2-foot hole over there. And there are hundreds of golf courses that are doing this now, by the way, and making money at it. That's okay if you're looking at it through the lens of, hey, I own a golf course and I want to make money and I can't seem to raise the bar on my regular play, I'm hitting the ceiling. And that's okay. It's kind of like selling tennis or curling or something else, but it's not golf.
So it's a traffic builder.
It's a traffic builder. It's an amenity. It's not doing any harm if they can put it off to the side and keep it from interfering. Some of the courses are trying to put foot golf mixed in with regular golf on their course, and they're finding that kind of difficult. And I don't think they're seeing that the soccer players actually like this a lot. That part of it is working. But I don't see that the soccer players are saying, hey, I'm going to convert to real golf as a result of being exposed to it. And I would suggest the odds of that happening are no higher, or probably, it's just as likely that a regular golfer is going to see these guys playing foot golf and playing 18 holes in an hour and a half and only paid $19 and saying, I think I'm going to switch from regular golf to that. So I don't see it as a solution to growing the actual game of golf. But and then you get frisbee golf and you got speed golf, where they actually run. You carry like your clubs and you run, and there's a timing score that goes.
We do that every Saturday morning.
That first group out in the morning, to set the pace for everybody else.
Well, hey, that's great, because we talked internally about all that stuff, and you're right. We have a very traditional offer here. We don't want to mess with that. At the same time, we need to be looking ahead at what's out there and what's coming. Maybe building on that a little bit, you get a chance to travel the country again and talk to all kinds of different operators. Are you seeing clubs offering anything else in the way of facilities? Are they adding on to their facilities to attract people? That sort of thing?
A little bit. Over dinner we mentioned fitness clubs at some golf clubs, a little bit of momentum for that. We're seeing some daycare centers at golf clubs, and that helps to feed the parents available time to go out and play golf. I don't know that we're seeing radical change that really becomes that silver bullet. There's a little bit of a lot of things that are being dabbled with. If you're an actual golf course owner rather than a member-owned club, you do spend a lot of time thinking about how can I diversify my business, and I think all those things are fair game. But I don't know that they really do solve the challenge of trying to resume golf's growth in the number of players and the frequency of play. They're small parts of that solution. But again, the innovation I think generally is a good thing, and I don't knock it at all. I just see it as a fairly minor thing in the grand scheme of things. I think we'd be better off to devote a lot of energy to improved marketing. Golf's been a little guilty of almost like build it and they will come.
Yeah.
We're good order takers. We're not necessarily good sales people to go out and create the business. And that's everything from the advertising and promotion to the social media, or just sometimes how we structure our offering or how we price golf. You're going to see a lot more attention paid to, for example, dynamic pricing. We've moved towards it. First it was like weekday and weekend rates and twilight rates. Some of the obvious things, but much more so on a public access course than a private course. But I think even on a private course, the guest fee at one time a day isn't equal. That experience isn't equal to every other. The demand for that particular tee time isn't equal to every other, and dynamic pricing is really demand-based pricing to try and measure the demand for that tee time, like an airline seat or a hotel room, and to use fairly typical examples where they got wide ranges of pricing. They're all about what is the demand for that at that point in time. You're going to see a lot more of that, which I put inside of the overall marketing mix of things that I think we need to focus on to market what we've got, which is great, a little bit better than we've had to in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess a little bit of where my head was going with that question was around the whole notion of trying to draw more families to the game. As you know, and I think would support, historically golf has been the individual sport and bit elitist, and am I going to be able to get away this morning to play golf sort of thing. Can we do more to draw families to the game?
I think you hit on a great point that family golf is a big part of our solution, big opportunity in the future. One of the reasons that a lot of golf courses are quiet, for example, on a Sunday afternoon, it's not that everybody's at work, which you might explain Tuesday afternoon.
Right.
It's because there's the tendency to be doing the family thing. We can bring that family experience to the golf course. We run a program, I'll put in a little plug for this, that we've got 700 golf courses across Canada running one program called Take a Kid to the Course. And it is focused on family golf, and it's basically free golf for the kids in a defined period who come with a paying adult if it's a public golf course. And we get a little promotion behind it. We provide a marketing kit for each of those 700 courses to help them promote it in their own grassroots manner. And you get tens of thousands of golfers during that 1 week. We usually focus on the second week of July, that are just getting the family experience out to the golf course. And the hook is, the free golf for the kids. Well, that gets them out, and then you start to appreciate just what a great family experience that is. Then can lead to so many other things, and we encourage courses to do it for more than just that 1 week, but it can lead to them, the juniors becoming players or the spouse becoming a player, whether they come as a family the next time, where it starts to break down. Same good news story, whatever the outcomes are. And a lot of courses are doing various things aimed at the same goals, attracting the family golf. And I think the other related point is, studies are showing that women are making a lot more of the decisions about golf membership and golf spending in general on behalf of the family. They're determining that much more so than the old days, where it was a little bit more of sort of the old boys, Saturday mornings the boys go golfing, right? that kind of thing.
No change for John.
I was just ahead of the curve.
Okay, well, great. I think there's a huge opportunity for families out there, and we really need to do some more work on that.
And women on their own too. If you
Yeah.
separate from the family, it works both ways. It's one of the fastest growing sectors. I think we probably need to do a better job, generally speaking, and I'm not thinking about this golf club by any means, of delivering the experience to women in the way they want to receive it. Again, it's sort of morphed a bit from a man's environment.
Oh, yeah.
And we've been a little slow, and maybe it's because I have those 3 daughters, John, but I've noticed an awful lot of, conferences and so on, the talk. Hey, the women's a big opportunity, we're gonna cater to women, but not walking the walk. You get out to their golf course, and it can be anything from the placement of the washrooms, how many of them, and are they up to the right standard? It can be the menus. There's a tendency towards more healthy dining typically with women. It can be how many female golf pros or just staff in general that correspond with them. But particularly, I think the golf pro role is important. How is the pro shop merchandised? They have a much more acute eye to apparel purchases, for example, than men do. And you have to deliver to that slightly differently, or where the tee blocks are placed. And then, I would suggest getting away from ladies, men, pros, seniors, whatever your standardized tees are, and just have more tee blocks generally where we can afford to do so is good, and more forward tee blocks is really the point there. And that's not all about women, but a certain part of it's about women. A woman's tee for the average woman, and there are some that drive way past me, but for the average woman, a tee block 30 yards, 50 yards, 70 yards in front of yours on a par 5 doesn't make much sense. So whatever distance you hit the ball times whatever it takes, par 4 or par 5, to hit a green in regulation, you just back that up. The tee blocks for that person should be there so that they hit it twice to a par 4 distance. That's partly a commentary, I think, on catering more appropriately to female golfers. But you could broaden it to beginners in general. You can broaden it to seniors.
Sure.
Any way you like. Now, there's a great program out of the States, now that we're just touching on that point, called Tee It Forward,
Yeah, I saw that.
which we're endorsing in Canada, and it's all about pretty much that. Get more forward tee blocks and encourage golfers to go to the tee block that fits their game so they have the distance to reach greens in regulation. They'll enjoy it more. It solves a lot of your pace of play issues. They're happier, they'll score better.
Yeah, in fact, we were just talking about that last week with Dean, particularly about the junior program, and thinking about putting some forward blocks out there. Not making new boxes, but putting some blocks out that would give them a chance, and maybe Kelly a chance too.
But it's the
But
same.
not in the cup.
It's the same thing for our ladies. I mean, number 15, 500 yards off the forward tee box is just atrocious for those ladies.
Yeah, good point. Yeah. So
Doesn't
that's
make
stuff
sense.
we need to think about, right, and do a better job of.
I think eventually you're gonna see them called something else. A lot of courses are already doing that. You don't call it the ladies' tee. It's for anybody who shoots between 90 and 100 or an 18 handicap, whatever way you wanna measure it. It doesn't matter if you're male, female, child, adult, beginner, senior, right? It's
Yeah.
your game belongs on a certain tee. And we all, especially the men, have a tendency to wanna be one tee, generally speaking, one tee block further back than we belong. We're either overconfident, we all think we drive it farther than we do and straighter than we do, and it can apply to everybody. Move on.
Guilty.
There you go.
Guilty. Absolutely. So those are some great thoughts, and good food for thought for us, Jeff. Thanks very much for that.
Change the colors of them. You get away from the stereotype. Instead of red, white, blue, I don't know if that's what you use, but you go to orange, purple, and whatever. And it starts to eliminate it from being, that's for the ladies and that's for the seniors. The purple tees are for people from 90 to 100. That kind of thing.
Yeah, makes good sense.
But you're also back to tradition and progress, right? Some people want to hang on to this is the way it's always been. And that's the debate you have to have internally, and it's not for every club.
Well, there's good arguments about that just from pace of play points of view as well, right? But more importantly, it's about enjoyment of the game. You know, I know when I play with my wife and she's getting much better at the game, it still really frustrates her to get up on 15 tee box and have to face 500 yards hitting the ball 5 times to get to the green.
Oh, Brent, you said you played, was it yesterday or something? You played from the 4 tees with your wife and had more fun than you ever do, you know? You would not normally have played there, but there's nothing wrong with playing. It's a different experience and it can be a lot more fun. It's nice to get those birdies.
I think we neglected to introduce one.
Yeah, if I could just take the moment to introduce Brent Hutchin, who works with us. He runs Alberta for the National Golf Course Owners Association, so you will see him around just outside of Calgary, where our office out here is. And nice to have Brent joining us here today.
Thanks for being with us, Brent.
Just called me the chauffeur today.
Yeah, good man. I've only got a couple more questions for you, and then we'll open it up to the floor, Jeff. And these are pretty broad ones. From your perspective, what do you think the biggest opportunities for our industry are over the next little while?
Biggest opportunity?
Yeah.
On the demographic side, I would say women, which we just discussed, so I would answer it there. I think we have great opportunities to do better on marketing than we currently do. I think if we had tapped out our marketing ability, our marketing plan for every golf course, and as associations on the macro side, I think if we had tapped that out and we felt we were doing all we could do, and we're seeing the ceiling that we're hitting, that would be a little discouraging. But the truth of it is we haven't tapped that out. There's a lot of upside that we're now being forced to do that we didn't need to do when we're just, you know, things would be great even if you're average or below average in marketing. I think that's an opportunity. I think there's technology solutions that we haven't yet leveraged and that can connect back to the juniors for sure, but for everybody. The use of social media, which is, you know, is it mainstream yet? Maybe yes, maybe no. Some of the surveys I see show that social media from a marketing standpoint is not delivering great results. I sense that probably it's because it's not being used properly, and it's not a fault of the new media, it's a fault of how we deliver content through that new media. But there's things like that. There's, I think, your mobile apps. I mean, we're going to have to get over the fact that these smartphones belong on a golf course.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of other games, I mean, this particularly will appeal to the younger ones. You know, games right on their phone that make the game of golf more interesting in the way that they see the world. It may not be for everybody in our audience here, but there is an opportunity, I think, to tap into that and be part of the solution on the juniors. I think match play has probably not been exploited as much as it should be. You just look at match play and team play. You look at the popularity of the Ryder Cup or President's Cup. That's as good as spectator golf gets, and it's also a bit faster. And you know, it's the way the game originally was intended to be played. I think you may see a little bit of an evolution towards some of those things. And another opportunity would be for those courses that are hitting a high standard on the environmental front, which we haven't really had time to touch on so far. But those who are doing a great job on that, I think, should promote it effectively. There are statistics you can get out there as to the average fertilizer and chemical use on a golf course, and if your course is outperforming that, that's resonating well with a certain sector of our golf market. So those are some of the opportunities, I think, to do things a little differently going forward than we have in the past.
So that last piece, the whole sustainability thing, right?
Yeah, sustainability. We're going to be under some pressure in the future to do better at that. We already are environmentally.
Right.
But as we succeed at it, you know, for example, courses that have the Audubon Sanctuary certification, not only is that solid and strong to do for the altruistic reasons of it's great for the environment, but it can become a great way to present yourself to the market and engage some people that might have been on the fence as to what they think about your golf course. Maybe separate yourself from the course down the street. It is competitive. If you're the environmentally friendly one, promote it.
Good point, good point. Lastly, for me, threats. We talk about opportunities. What do you see as threats to particularly to the private club industry?
Well, I mean, I don't think the competition is going to get any easier. So back to the number of courses that are out there.
Yep.
We have to accept that threat going forward, that it's going to be a competitive marketplace. I think there's a second level of competitive threat from other industries that compete for the same disposable income, and they're pretty good at being aggressive, and they're pretty good at their marketing. I think that's a bit of a threat. The environmental story that we just touched on, I think the pressures in order to continue to use a certain amount of pesticide products, for example, because we're dealing in professional turf grass in harsh weather conditions, and there aren't yet organic products that can fully meet the need. I mean, it's going in that direction.
Right.
And that relates back to our government advocacy issues. We better be able to tell our story that separates us from the homeowner or the parkland. This is professional turf grass. It's a necessity. It's not a cosmetic. Without your fall fungicide, you're in trouble in the spring. There's no two ways about it. To be able to tell that story, and the fact that it's all applied by, it's not applied by amateurs. These are professionals, graduates of whatever University of Guelph turf grass, et cetera. So some of those threats, I think, are environmental. I think there's another threat that gets a little outside of the private club experience, but the third-party reseller story. Golf Now in particular is an enormous enterprise that is reselling golf courses' tee times, taking advantage of the technology developed, to allow for it, taking advantage of the fact that the golf industry generally is oversupplied. So courses are anxious to sell tee times and will then accept a company like Golf Now, who's a third party, and they don't own any golf courses, but they'll resell your tee times. And the risk to that, which can trickle down through to future impact on private courses, the risk to that is they tend to drive the price of golf down. Now that's good for the golfer, but back to sustainability, that eventually leads to the golf course having to cut either the course conditions or the service levels or something if they're being forced to sell below what it really had to be sold for. Courses have, in some cases, been losing control of their price through these third-party resellers. And they're just like in the hotel industry. You got Expedia, Hotels.com, and so on.
Sure.
The hotel industry went through the same thing in the early 2000s, where they lost control of their own price through these resellers, and they worked very hard to get it back. That's a threat to our industry. And then the second part of that threat is you lose the loyalty of your customer. The customer becomes loyal to the third-party website.
Sure.
And not necessarily you owning your own customer. That's a bit dangerous. So those are some of the threats I see to our industry going forward. And I think they all have solutions. For example, on that third-party reseller, just to have a best rate guarantee on that golf course's website.
Right.
Again, it applies mostly to the semi-private and public courses. But if you can promote that you can never get a lower rate than through us, the biggest risk on those third-party resellers goes away. And I'll give you one last one. I do think it's already here, but Golf Town, in terms of your retail shop sales, that whole world has been a threat to us on the golf course operations side. These things they move fast, and the threats can be new and coming at us more quickly than they ever used to be. We have to be pretty agile and pretty progressive with the solutions we're going to come up with. I think that itself is an important point to. Again, it's back to the balance of the tradition and the progress. You got to keep a pretty good eye on the progress necessary that we don't get defeated by the traditional pull. And it's a balance somewhere in between, different balance for every club.
Well, that's a pretty good list on both sides, opportunities and threats.
And the opportunities is the glass half full. If we do a good job on that, we can manage those threats as effectively as any industry.
I really like your notion of that we need to do a better job of telling our story.
Absolutely.
I and getting it out. So I'm going to stop with my questions there. It's been about an hour of activity. Are you good to go for a few more minutes?
Love to.
So we'll open it up to the floor for folks to ask questions. Do we have a mic, John, or are we just going to go?
Yeah, just kind of hand it out.
I'm going to start over here.
Yes.
Yes, testing.
Thank you. This may be more of a question for David or for Jan, but in terms of threats, I see our biggest local competitive threat being the Windmill Group, who owns the Hampton Springbank Links, is building a big course somewhere, who is selling memberships now for $14,900, which includes the first year fees, including the card. And if you happen to be a member of another club, you get in for $5,000 less than that. And the word from the members up at the Hamptons is that they've already picked up 100 new members this year and potentially 125 members. So what are we seeing in terms of our attempts at marketing from this aggressive pricing from the Windmill Group?
Geez, I don't know if I want to answer that. Well, you're absolutely right. The Windmill Group's been very aggressive. They want to expand and move that Hamptons course to a, they say private, I think it can only ever become semi-private sort of thing, but at this point in time, we've chosen not to try and compete with that. We have a slightly different offer here than what they're putting out, and we're going to stay with our offer and drive it. We are still signing up new members, and we've introduced our new trial membership this year, which has been pretty successful, John, I think.
Yes, we have 8 trial members. We just started this 2 weeks ago, and all of the 8 are related to or friends of members, so we have not marketed this, so our membership's strong. The Windmill Group will never be able to give you that sense of belonging, and what we have to do here is build on what that sense of belonging is, what's the compelling things that are bringing you to this club and creating relationships for you, and that's our current focus related to what the Windmill Group would offer. So you'll go into the Windmill Group clubs and you won't know people there. You know, they will provide a great variety of golf clubs. There's no doubt about that. But what is sense of belonging and what is membership? And that's why Dean and I have been brought here, and we've arrived to a fully engaged membership that is way beyond, I think, what even the membership realizes at the committee level and throughout the golf clubs.
Consolidation is definitely another trend. We didn't have time to touch on it yet, but management companies such as the Windmill Group, that's a trend that's coming to Canada. The United States is well ahead of us in that regard. And they got those advantages of the efficiencies that will lead them to often price aggressively, and they're purchasing effectively as groups of courses, and on the marketing side they can pool dollars, so they have those advantages. But what John says is absolutely the other side of the story. What I see with them is the loss of the personal service, and there's an emotional equity that you get out of a member-owned club and a standalone club that those management companies have a hard time getting. We're more exposed to it in Ontario than out here because of ClubLink. They've got over 50 courses now, and they've had a significant impact, and the majority of those are private, high-end courses. They've had a significant impact on the market. They got 20,000 members, so 20,000 golfers were pulled from other courses into their stable. But they do tend to get criticized. They've been at it enough years now that you can sort of track it. They do tend to get criticized for this impersonal, corporate kind of feel, regardless of the caliber of the golf course. So that I think is the advantage to be leveraged. And the other thing I would say is you can't win by discounting. There's always, another somebody else. You want to win instead by differentiating yourself. To both John and David's points, with the service offering, the caliber of all the things that we've been discussing, the course, the service, the amenities. And if you can differentiate it, then it's not an apples to apples comparison on pricing. One of the beauties of golf is no two golf courses are the same, so it's easier to differentiate compared to many other industries where it's just, you know, if you're gonna buy a Honda Civic from that dealer or that dealer,